Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. I am Dean, and I have my co-host Devin with me. Say hi, Devin.
Hey guys, how is everyone doing tonight?
So we are on the heels of the Toronto Regional Championships, and I actually went and competed at this tournament. So we're gonna just talk about the meta that was there, what I saw, pretty much what everyone saw from this tournament. We'll talk about the day 2 results and the meta breakdown, and then we'll go into my experience on what I played and how I did, and we'll wrap the episode up with our road deck of the week. So without further ado, gonna say a certain archetype kind of dominated day 2.
Oh yeah, it definitely decided to say I'm here and basically say I'm going to make a lot of noise on my way out.
Yeah, so those who don't know, the tournament was won by American player Calvin Connor playing the Regidrago. And it's not just that he won playing Regidrago. It's that second place played Regidrago. Fourth place played Regidrago. Fifth place played Regidrago. Seventh place played Regidrago. Eighth place played Regidrago. 10th place played Regidrago.
I'd say he can keep on going because there's like 41 of these placements that this deck ended up with pulling.
Yeah, it's just so 7. So there was a top cut of 12. 7 of the 12 was Regidrago. So yeah, it wanted to make an appearance at the end of its standard life for sure, and it's doing that.
No, and I think it, like we were talking last week of the idea that it is definitely a deck to build around, and it definitely was a top level meta deck. I think this tournament cemented its status as number 1.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the weird thing is there was not necessarily a meme, but people are talking about or really comparing this to Broken Lugia from Silver Tempest and how it won, I believe, 7 regionals, while that formation of a deck, I'm saying it like that because Lugia is still around, but like just the way it was built with the amazing rares and using the rainbow energy and all that, it's getting close to that number. It's right now has won 5 regionals, and really that's all been in the last year.
Yeah, 6 regionals and 2 internets, and it's lifetime as a deck meta, as a meta deck.
Yeah.
So it's definitely always a contender. It is one of those decks that I think now, instead of having the conversation of, oh, like dance around Draco, I will be fine. It's you have to have a counter in Draco. And with this deck not having a weakness, your counter needs to be partially skill and gameplay oriented. You can't just put in a tech attacker being like, oh, this attack does 140. If I hit it with weakness, it KOs it. Like, you don't have that luxury with this deck against this deck.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of players are trying to figure out the best way to counter this deck. And ironically enough, the number 2 popular deck for both day 1 and day 2 is Charizard, and that actually has a pretty bad Drago matchup. But it beats everything else, though.
Yeah, and I think that is the quintessential, if I beat everything else and I can make the other matchup. So, like, the Regidrago matchup is, what, 60-40, you would say? Maybe a little... It's no way it's any worse than that, really.
Maybe... what is it? 65-35? Just because Drago can one-shot Zard with the Giratina attack.
Yeah, but if
So
as a Charizard player, you're sitting at, all right, I can I can position myself well enough into a game where this is basically just two giants and two titans just slugging it out. If you win maybe half your Regidraco matchups and you beat everyone else, that's a good result on the weekend if you're a Charizard player.
oh yeah, for sure.
The issue is if you run into more than like 3 or 4 Regidracos in a particular weekend, then you're like, oh crap, this feels bad. But I think if you're picking Charizard, you're picking me. I can beat everyone else, and I will just slug out with Regidraco. And I think that's not a bad way of thinking when it comes to deck selection.
No, and with the League Battle deck that's out there, Charizard is a very affordable and powerful option if you are going to not just a regional tournament, but even your locals. It's going to do well no matter how you play. It's just built really well. It's just knowing the lines and basically learning how not to misplay with the Charizard deck. That's really all a player will have to learn. And it's, like I said, it's super affordable now. It's $40. I just bought one this week. And I'm like, okay, $40, and you get 2 Charizard EXs, 2 Pidgeot EXs, a Prime Catcher. You have a good skeleton, so as long as you have a decent bulk collection, you're basically playing a tournament winning deck from a box.
Yeah, and I think that one being Charizard made it easier for Pokemon to do that because Charizard just sells. But it's just the fact that I think typing and ability, it's just such a good card. It's really hard to say, all right, because if you say I'm bringing Charizard to a tournament, you're a threat. Like, let's just be honest. The deck is good. There's no way of saying it's not.
Yeah, and there's not many decks that can really hit it for weakness. There isn't really any good grass, like true attackers. Like, yeah, you have Teal Mask, Ogerpon, but in the decks that it's not really the main attacker. Like, you're forcing it to attack.
Yeah, Teal Mask Ogerpon is not considered a primary or secondary attacker really in any archetype it's realistically being ran in. Now, there's some archetypes out there that it is, but you're not seeing those at tournaments. Like, I think, like I said, typing, ability, attack, all that stuff, it's such a broken design card, but you see that with its history. It has 12 regional wins and 3 internet wins in its lifespan on top of how dominant Regidraco is. So you have 2 really titanic decks just controlling the top of the meta right now. And we were talking about last week where there's so many different archetypes that you can pick from and feel confident and make a run. Now it's when you make your deck decisioning and you're going through the process of selecting a deck, if you're not picking Draco or Charizard, you have to counter both.
Yeah.
You can't say like, oh, I'm just going to dance around these matchups. No, you're going to be running into them 1 every 2 times.
Yeah, and honestly, I saw that when I was playing. Around me was either, I think almost every single round, I was sitting next to a Drago player or going against a Drago player. It's that popular. And same thing with Zard, but to maybe a little lesser extent. Like, we knew Zard was there, but because of the differences, like, there was a major player amount difference between Drago and Zard, but compared to everything else, like you said, they just completely dominated. Like, a decent chunk of players played those 2 decks, and then everything else was just trailing, really.
Yeah, on day 1, those 2 decks comprised almost 25% of all decks entered into the entire tournament.
Yeah.
And then on day 2, it comprised of 35% of day 2. So over a third of day 2 was those 2 archetypes alone. And keep in mind, there's 25 different archetypes in day 2. So those 2 decks definitely put their stranglehold onto the meta. And then going forward between now and rotation, you're just going to have to deck build around them. Like, there's no way of saying otherwise. Or you're playing them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I tend not to play the big meta decks because, one, I just don't want... It's just the cost. Like, the Teal Mask Ogerpons are just so expensive. I could actually play Charizard now because I have all those cards, but for a while I couldn't.
Yeah, I think and that's what we talked about just a few minutes ago, right? The fact that Charizard is affordable because Pokemon is kind of shoving Charizard in her face, and the fact that it's popular because it's Charizard, but Charizard was such a I want to say well-designed card. A well-designed card means there's balances. Charizard is just so like every aspect of that card is good. Its typing, its HP, its ability, and its attack. Where it's foolish to say, "Oh, I can't win with this." Yeah, you can. It's a good card. There is no way around it. It's just super easy to set up. It's low to the ground, and you just can. And the fact that it's super affordable, it makes it even easier for a player to just pick it up and say, "I'm just going to play."
Yeah, it is a fun deck to play. I played it a couple times online, but yeah. So those two decks kind of steamrolled the competition. Looking at what made day 2, is there any is there a deck that kind of stands out or like, ooh, like I'm glad I saw this kind of place well, or is there anything that you want to talk about?
I mean, the one thing I just want to finish off of the Charizard is we just talked about how popular and how good Charizard is, but it didn't. The highest placing Charizard was 21st, but it
Yeah,
clustered a lot between 21st and like 50.
which
So I think that
is not opposite of what Drago did. So Drago clustered all on the top table, so obviously got a lot in the top 16, and then you didn't really it. Then it's really just sporadic throughout, and then you see a bunch at like towards like the 100 or so. So overall, you could make the argument that Charizard did better because on average it did higher versus like yes the 7 of the top cut was Drago, but the rest of the Drago players that made day 2 didn't go anywhere near that.
yeah, it was Draco's points accumulation was very top heavy. While I think Charizard was very like it was definitely average. Like Draco's average, or sorry, Charizard's average was better than Draco's average, but Draco definitely did more in terms of all form of production.
Yeah.
So, but I would say the only other thing other than that, because that was what really like we talked about Charizard, and I'm like, wow, it clustered really, really hard. Um, I mean, maybe the only other thing that was really interesting to me was how surprisingly high a Roaring Moon deck did.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere.
But it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a high percentage a day too. Like this, like we're legitimately talking about one player on a like an outlier to the mean of its own archetype. Like it did really well, and I think that it was very interesting. But I also think it's because of how it was deck built, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the this player that got 20th place, I kind of like some of the inclusions in the list. Um, it has a Koraidon, that new one from Surging Sparks, where it is a fighting type, and it does 180 damage if another one of your future Pokemon didn't attack your last turn. So it has the hits for weakness for Terrapagos. It hits weakness against Fezandipiti. It There's a lot of strong support mons that are weak against fighting, and it helps you take care of that as a single prizer. And if you are struggling to get your Roaring Moon EX or EX ones out, or if you just want to stay single prizes, it helps you there with it.
Yeah, but also I think what it is the fact that it's one of those. It helps you not miss out on pace
Yeah.
because it's for 2 colors energy, and that's super easy to do in that deck.
Oh yeah. Like
It's sometimes getting that third energy is the hard part. So if you attacked with your Roaring Moons and got return KO'd, you just promote this Koraidon and kind of still keep pace and maybe build a Roaring Moon on the bench. That way, you're kind of mixing up and making your opponent play maybe a 7 prize game at a point to slow it down.
yeah, and I also like the ace spec of choice in this list too. It is definitely something we haven't seen a lot of.
Honestly, I think it's really, really smart. I think it works well with this deck, with in terms of being a switch card and an energy saving card.
Yeah, so
With that,
those who don't know, this list played the Scramble Switch, which typically in Aurora Moon you see Prime Catcher, but sometimes you want to kind of get the energy off a very heavily damaged EX to kind of, and if you can't have the Sadas or another way to get energy on board, like this is an easy way to kind of save your energy, and also a fun way to pull off the Radiant Greninja Moonlight Shuriken play too.
yeah, it definitely can help with that as well. Obviously, with its low retreat costs, you're not really wanting to put a a Greninja into play unless you're planning on attacking on the turn of the switch. But with everything else being 2 retreat costs, I think it's a very creative way to keep those energy in play without having to sacrifice anything to the discard pile. Now, this deck does play for Dark Patch, so putting darkness energy into the discard pile is not always a bad thing, but sometimes it just feels better to keep that energy on board.
Yeah, and it's obviously it's all matchup dependent and all that too. So it was nice to see a deck come out of the woodwork and do very well. Another archetype that I thought did very well considering what is out there is Snorlax Stall. It was the third most popular deck in day 2, and it really did have a decent outing. The top one was top 32 with Dennis Peroff from Canada. And the big inclusion in this list...
I mean, there's Stefan Lowe got 19th.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Oh, yeah, Stefan Lowe. Let's look at his list. So one of the big things that the stall decks are adding now is that Mimikyu to help, or not Mimikyu, I'm sorry, Klefki to help shut off basic Pokemon's abilities.
Yeah, but like Stefan's didn't run the Klefki, ran a Mantine. A Mantine is the
interesting. Yeah, that I haven't seen that one.
Basic water. I think it's for, obviously, if anything, it's for the first attack. Born ashore, put a basic Pokemon from either player's discard pile onto that player's bench. So you can either put a Snorlax or a Mimikyu back into play on your end, or put a targetable Pokemon that you want to get stuck. You want to stick into your opponent's active.
Yeah, that's definitely there. It's going back to the old Echoing Horn strategy. I remember playing that in Charlotte earlier this year. I actually liked doing that. Echoing Horn, boss, easy KO. But for a deck like this, it's basically you use the Mantine and then you're bossing up a Pokemon they can't retreat out, and then they're stuck. And you're just milling them out while you just do what they do. Another Pokemon I've seen a lot come up with stall is the Mawile, actually. With the Tempting Trap. So you play the energy, Mawile, and the same concept. You kind of get like a Squawk or a Minion stuck in the active, and you're forcing them to use your switch cards.
Yeah, I mean, that's always what stall is about. I'm just like John. I do not like stall. I do not like control decks. I will never play them. I will never learn how to play them, but I will learn how to play against them. And when I deck build, I will always just have an anti-control measure in my deck, unless it just destroys the consistency. So,
yeah,
I mean, kudos to those players who want to learn that, and that's the type of gameplay that really makes them happy. It's just not a game. It's just not an archetype for me.
I'm the same way. If I come against the one stall player, I try my best. And if it's my only loss, it's my only loss. Let's see what else made day 2 that's interesting. One deck that kind of caught my eye was that Blood Moon Ursaluna deck.
Yeah, it was the only one. It was a 1 of 1, right? That made day 2.
Hey all you rogues out there, we just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you to our sponsor, For Honor and Glory. They are a great support to us and have all the things you need related to Pokemon, Magic, D&D, Warhammer, and more. You can go on over to forhonorandglory.com and use discount code ROGUE24. That's forhonorandglory.com and discount code ROGUE24 for 10% off your entire online order. Alright, let's get back to talking about those sneaky decks.
Interesting enough, he actually made day 2 in Baltimore this year too with the same deck. This player, so he's definitely a Blood Moon stan. But it's an interesting list. I know I kind of texted you about it separately. Glad that like a nice single prize list did well. But is there anything else you want to talk about in regards to the results or anything interesting that stands out to you?
I don't think so. I mean, the overall day 2 feel is definitely, and as every tournament will be, is that there was no exciting off the wall story, right? It was very much archetypes that are established show why they're established archetype. There was no crazy story to watch that, oh, this archetype's doing really well, let's watch it go up the standings, does it keep undefeated, does it keep a good record? There just wasn't any of that at the time, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was just, there was no hype behind that.
Yeah, it is a big difference for the NA tournaments, the North American tournaments, where the big standout with Cloth Trap goes, where that came out of nowhere and did really well, versus this tournament, there was really nothing that came out of nowhere. No, it wasn't. There's no new deck that's now going to be the hot topic going into the next month before we have the next regional in England. It's kind of like you said. Now we have an established meta, and people are just sticking with it.
And I mean, it makes sense, right? With the way the regionals are, it's, you don't really have, once you win a regional, you're probably not attending another regional again because you don't need to. And there is no risk reward aspect to it anymore. It's, can I get my W, or can I just get good points if I don't get my W, which means people are going to go to more risk averse decisions. There is not going to be a volatile decision. They're going to go safe as safe can be.
Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, I guess we can talk about my run with Toronto.
I would say we definitely should talk about your, not even just your run. Like, let's talk about your matchups and talk about how, like, I think you were tested in a way that as a player you probably never thought you would be tested before.
So yeah, so spoiler alert, I did not make day 2. But with that being said, I feel like I had a really good record. I ended at 5-3-1 with having 2 win-in opportunities. As you can tell, I did not do well at those opportunities, but the fact that I was able to put myself in that situation compared to when I was in Charlotte in January, I was like playing the whole entire round or the whole entire day 1 trying to get into a win-in, and I felt like I kind of locked myself in that situation earlier with this tournament, which to me is, I think that's impressive and it shows my growth, even though I did miss out on day 2. But I guess that's just like the way I'm seeing it. Some people may say, "Oh no, what are you talking about? You actually did worse. You didn't make day 2 versus Charlotte." But I guess I'm just trying to be looking at my perspectives, you know.
No, I think on paper, yeah, it's like, all right, if compared to 2 regionals, one was a day 2, one you lost 2 win-ins. Which one would have been the better one? Well, a lot of people say, well, you made day 2. It's obviously the better tournament. But I saw this really interesting thing that compared some football team statistics, right? Not all records are the same, even if they have the same record. The example that I saw this was in NFL right now, there's 3 teams in the NFC that are 11-2 or 12-2 or something like that. Yeah, 12-2 because they're going into week 15 this week. And if you look at their records, they all have the same record. But if you look at their opponents, like their strength of schedule and then their opponent's strength of schedule, which is basically what Tom does for you anyway, right? When they create rankings and all that stuff.
Yep.
There are 2 teams that are playing a significantly harder competition than the third. So you can say, all right, out of the 3 teams, how would you rank them? Well, 1 and 2 can argue they're within percentage points of each other. And then the third one is like, we're talking like 550 win percentage, 530 win percentage, 440 win percentage. That may not sound like a lot, but that's 2 wins or 3 win difference in terms of your opponents on average. So with that being said, let's talk about your round by round. And at the end, I think we'll show how hard of a route you got on your 9 rounds on day 1.
Yeah, so we'll start with my first round. Sat down, and it was actually a friend of one of the people I was staying with. So shout out to the Michigan crew, Solomon. He was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. I stayed with him, and man, we had a fun time rooming together. I love his insight and just all the inside jokes that we've had, and also Justin Turner. He was on the podcast as well. We all stayed together. So we introduced each other. He was like, "Yeah, I'm from so and so." I'm like, "Oh, do you know this player?" And right off the bat, he knew the people I was staying with. So that was really, really fun. And he was playing Charizard actually. So my first round, go against him. I won game 1, lost game 2, and won game 3. So I got the win for that round. And I will say I got pretty lucky. He did not draw and start well in really all 3 games. He came back from behind in game 2 and just caught me. But I was able to use my Electrode properly, and also, for those who don't know, I play Cloth Trapgos. No real secret there. I've been grinding that deck for a while now. And I was just able to use the Petrunt really well and try to prevent him from drawing cards. I believe this is actually the matchup where I had to stop him from using Unfair Stamp, because he got knocked out from poison damage, and you can't use Unfair Stamp because it has to be, it's kind of like the Fezandipiti, where it has to be knocked out during your opponent's turn. So it was really interesting to kind of showcase how the poison aspect worked with this deck. But yeah, it was a really fun matchup. Great guy. I ran into him later that night at a restaurant. We were actually chatting up. He did well with the tournament, which we'll talk about later. After we go round by round.
I was going to say, yeah, no, and this is where I wanted to get at it. So he ended up finishing 5-3-1.
Yeah.
So that was your round 1 opponent. So you already played someone who was on the cusp of day 2, just like you are too. So let's talk about your round 2. How did your round 2 go?
So round 2, I went against a Gholdengo player. I won that one. I won kind of same thing with my round 1. Won game 1, lost game 2, won game 3. It was really close. Prior to the Tropicos edition, Gholdengo is actually a very hard matchup for Cloth because you can't get to that 260 HP mark. But now you can do that with the Tropicos, and you actually overshoot it. So because of that, they're always using Fezandipiti. But I was just able to get his Pokemon out and kind of play to a single prize board state as much as possible. He kind of can't do that because he has to rely on that Gholdengo. And yeah, it was a fun matchup. Great guy. Kind of wanted to see his list afterwards, but we didn't have enough time because I know our good friend John, he loves Gholdengo, and to me, it looked like a really fun list. But yeah, it's just going 2-0 after the second round. It felt really good at that point.
And then, again, round 2 opponent, he ended up going 5-2-2, so another player on the cusp of day 2 as well. So we're 2-0 after 2 rounds. Let's talk about round 3.
Yeah, so round 3, that was my Regidrago matchup. So I actually won that 2-0 straight up. he did not set up, and he was not able to set up well at all. I was just able to do my setup and get knock out his attacker really quick. And I think round 2 only lasted like 3 minutes. Like he started pass, and I was able to just kind of donk him. But I was really nervous about going against Drago because I was expecting them to play Noivern. And this is one thing we didn't really talk about when we talked about Drago. A lot of the top players did not play Noivern. And that kind of threw me off guard because in my local scene, I have a player that played it, and it was hard to play around that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it comes to the box decisions, right? Sometimes you just don't play it because you don't care about a certain matchup, or you don't know about a certain matchup, and it's just always one of those tougher decisions because sometimes you with a box deck you have 64 cards and you have to cut something.
Yeah. So I was able to win that pretty quick. So go 3-0 pretty early on into the tournament.
3-0, and your round 3 opponent ended up going to 6-2-1, so that's a day 2 qualifier in itself. So we're 3 rounds in, you're 3-0, and you played against 2 people who ended up bubbling and 1 person who ended up making day 2. So let's talk about round 4. How did round 4 go?
So round 4, I go against Lost Box. The whole match was done in 20 minutes, if not less. Lost Box is a bad matchup for me. I lost. I went 0-2. It's just they can hit hard and take out my Pokemon and do all the spread, and I just can't keep up, especially with playing more on the Trap Ghost side of my build. And yeah, and it's one of those things. I knew that was a bad matchup going into this tournament, and I was just hoping that I wouldn't hit any. And I was talking to this opponent afterward. He was like, "Bro, I'm 4% in the meta. Like what you did." I wouldn't doubt what you did. Like, you're fine. You played your deck well. I just destroy you. I'm like, yeah, I know. I get it. It is what it is. So,
yeah,
go 0-2. So, I'm 3-1 at this point.
3-1, and your round 4 went 7-1-1. So, a day 2 qualifier there. So, like, you kind of get what I was trying to get at in the beginning of this conversation. It's not all records are just created the same. You've already gone through 4 really tough pilots, through 4 really good trainers, and now round 5. Well, let's talk about that.
Before we go to round 5, one thing I want to note, my round 4 opponent actually did the best out of all the Lost Box players in day 2 as well, getting top 128. So he did pretty well in day 2 as on top of that. So, but yeah, round 5, I go against Miraidon. So he's actually a Central Florida local, so we kind of talked about pretty much Orlando versus Tampa. We actually talked about UCF versus USF a lot during our match, so that was really fun. And as those know, Miraidon is whoever takes the first 2 prizes wins. So I was able to win game 1. He won game 2. And then the third game, he got the first 2 prizes. I'm like, oh man, this is not going to go well. But he keeps whiffing his E-Gens. And I was able to knock out his attacking Pokemon every single time. And he actually had a turn where he didn't attack me at all and just gave me the Magnemite. And I'm like, okay, cool story, bro. I want your 2 prizer. And I was able to clean up the victory after that. So I won 2-1 in that matchup. So now I am 4-1 going into after round 5.
And then your round 5 opponent ended up going 6-3, so he barely missed day 2 as well. But again, another player who did well. So round 6, so you're 4-1 at this point.
So round 6, yeah. So I'm with my buddies, and they make the announcement, round 6 pairings are up. Go find your table. So I look at it, let my phone load, and I recognize the name. I'm not going to say who it is on this podcast, but it is a very high-ranking North American player. I've seen him win regionals on TV. So I'm like, oh crap, this is going to be interesting match for sure. So I go down, and we sit down, we shuffle up, and we play, and he is playing Gardevoir. Just like Lost Box, this is a very, very hard matchup for me. They can just do the single prize way, they can Oko me, and with any Pokemon they have, it's just really hard. So I lost game 1, was up 3 prizes to 6, and he just did his thing and just kept on sniping me and just got me. Go to game 2. I decided to go first because I know I need to get pressure. I need to assert pressure. That's the only way I can really get ahead in this matchup. So I go first. He starts with a Drifblim. I start my Pokemon, and I was actually able to donk him. So I didn't even let him play. Like, I'm like, I do my thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna poison my Pitron and pass. And he looks at me. He's like, oh, you knock out my Pokemon. I'm like, yeah, I knocked out your Pokemon. It's like, okay, I'll go first. So we shuffle up for the next game. And then he starts with Ralts. I'm like, okay. Attaches, passes to me. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I was able to actually, had it to where I had on my board, I could either knock him out with the Petron or knock him out with my Cloth. So I just promoted a Petron because I'm like, if I'm going to get a donk, I want to be with the Petron. So I was able to just do the same thing over again. And those 2 matches, or those 2 games, lasted a total of 5 minutes, with most of it being shuffling. And I was able to walk away going 2-1 against one of the top players in our region, against a deck that should have beat me.
So after 6 rounds, you were 5-1. So at this point, like 5-1 does kind of give the listeners an idea. You just have to go 1-1-1 the next 3 rounds.
Yeah.
And you qualify for day 2. So you just need to get 1 win and 1 tie. You just need to get 4 match points in some combination of those. And then you are in day 2 of the tournament.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to round 7. How did that go?
So round 7, sat down, nice kid. We start talking, and he flips over. I'm trying to remember what he flipped over first. Oh, he started off with Cloth. I started with Iron Bundle, so he had no idea what I was playing. And he sets up his board, and I knew exactly what he's doing because I'm playing against a mirror deck. So it's a Cloth, which I'm kind of surprised it took 7 rounds until I went against my first mirror. So he's setting up. He has no idea what I'm doing. And then I pull my top deck. I'm like, man, I really like your deck. And I playing down the Cloth. And he was like, bro. And we just like give each other a high five. I love playing against other Cloth players because we know this deck shouldn't be good, but it is. So he wins game 1. Very long. So we go into game 2. And I knew we only had like 15 minutes left. So I had to try to get this game closed out as quickly as possible. So he's doing his thing. While he was doing some stuff, I asked him at least once. I'm like, hey, I like talking to you, man, but I need you to hurry up. I want to try to get this game done. So we go to time, judges come, and I was able to win the second game. So I turned to the judge, and I'm like, so what does this mean? He was like, 1-1, it's a tie. So I walk away from the mirror with it being a tie, which makes total sense with a Cloth matchup. The deck can take forever to play, so I'm not surprised that it took the whole entire round.
Okay, so you're now 5-1-1.
Yep.
So you got your draw. So you can't really draw again. If you do, then you give yourself only a true win and in. So and I'm assuming you know that you're at 5-1-1. You need to win at least. You just need 1 win in 2 rounds. I'm sure you know that. At that point,
yeah.
Right?
I'm like, okay. I need to get 1 more win. Hopefully I can do this. Got 2 opportunities. So at this point, I wouldn't say confident, but the fact that I knew I'm in a good situation. So I'm pretty excited. I'm talking to my crew that came up here from Tampa with me, and they're just as excited as me because like I'm doing really well in this tournament. So, and my round 7 opponent, his record was 5-3-1 as well, right? At the end.
Yeah. He ended up missing out just by 1 win too.
Yeah. So if you see the trend, all my opponents at this point either made day 2 or just missed day 2.
Yep.
So I go into round 8, sit down, and talk to the guy. He's from Miami. Really nice guy. We talk about how cold it is in Canada compared to back home in Florida. And then we start setting up, and he mulligans. I'm like, okay, cool. And he mulligans again. And then he mulligans a third time. Can you take a wild guess of what deck I'm playing that mulligans this much?
I mean, my only guess would be Quad Thorns, right?
It's Quad Thorns. And I knew that right away. I saw his hand. I took that really quick. So Cloth has an interesting relationship with Quad Thorns. I can one-shot it, but with playing the Trap Ghost version, it shuts down almost all my support Pokemon. So it is difficult, but not impossible to beat this deck. I will say my deck plays more switch cards than what a lot of decks play. I played the 3 switch cards versus 2 in preparation for matches like this. I did not want to get shut down from not using my Latias. So we play, and I just couldn't get set up. It's hard. If not being able to use my Squawkabilly, not being able to use Backwater with my Oranguru V, I basically am living on whatever items I have and my supporters and trying to get attackers going. And with him using Lost City, he Lost Cities both my Cloths. It's just really bad. So he takes game 1. So he starts. I decided to go second because I know I need to donk him to go. And he just attached pass, only has 1 Iron Thorns in the active. I'm like, okay, this is my opportunity. I need to do well with it. And this is probably where I misplayed a little bit. I did have a Carmine in my hand. I will say, in both my opening hands, I started with the Brute Bonnet, Ancient Capsule, and Cloth. That's, to me, a miracle in itself. So I'm like, okay, I just need to try to get... I need to get a DTE. So I had everything set up to get the donk. Carmine, and I just whiffed. And I kept on whiffing, and he was able to just knock me out because he was able to set up. So I walk away 0-2 against Quad Thorns. I wish I would have beat that. It's totally possible for me to beat that matchup, but being shut off from a lot of my abilities really hurts me with this version of Cloth.
Okay. I mean, but you knew that going into that, so you're like, all right, that's a risk. And honestly, you're talking about round 8 was the first time that really bit you in the butt.
Yeah. And honestly, that was the first time I dead drew this whole entire... And it's not really dead drawing. It's more of like I physically couldn't do what I needed to do because of the ability of Iron Thorns. Like, as much as people talk bad about that deck, it's honestly a good meta call. So I can't blame him from doing what he did. Like, he did what his deck's supposed to do. It's kind of like with me. People sometimes will get upset with me when I don't let them play the game when I go first. But that's just how we built our deck.
Yeah. All right, so you are 5-2-1.
Yep.
Going into round 9. So first off, this tournament had 9 rounds, which was, what, the second time all season?
Yeah, so we had 2,100 players. The kicker for 9 rounds is 2,000. So the overall bigger picture, we barely made that kicker. But still, 2,100 players. The only other tournament that had 9 rounds this season was Baltimore. So we go in. If this was a regular tournament, I would have made day 2 with a 5-2-1 record. But now because we have the 9 rounds, I have to get 6-2-1 instead of 5-2-1. So I sit down. Nice guy. Talk to this guy. He's from New York. Very nice guy. And I go against Raging Bolt. So first game, he was able to set up really quickly. He was able to knock me out. I just couldn't keep up with the prize race. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. We go to game 2. And my opening hand for game 2 was abysmal. I had Squawkabilly, I think a Cloth, and I think a Trapgos. I'm like, okay, I'm going to Squawk and Seize away my hand. 3 DTEs, a 4 Seal Stone, and an Energy Lotto, and then like some other dead card in my hand. I can't do anything with this. I whiffed. Oh, I had a Brute Bonnet. I whiffed the Ancient Capsule. I'm like, I'm just dead in the water. So I'm like, okay, pass. And luckily, he wasn't having much luck either. But it got to the point, I'm like, I'm drawing, can't do anything. I'm drawing, I can't do anything. No supporters, no tools. I didn't want to attach my DTE to my Cloth and play because I didn't want it to get knocked out because I couldn't attack. And that was probably the only time where I truly dead drew the whole entire tournament.
And it had to happen at the one time you really wanted to be at least somewhat consistent, which is probably a very disappointing and very frustrating way to end the tournament, but that's part of the game. It's
part of the game. I can't blame the guy. He was dead drawing too, but it's just he was able to pull it out before I could. So we talked afterwards. He asked for advice on his deck. He's like, hey, do you like the so-and-so inclusion I made? And I kind of reaffirmed him, like, yeah, what you did was really well. Because he was like, yeah, I was really stressed about the Cloth matchup. Because Cloth usually destroys Raging Bolts. So he had some thoughts about it. And he talked to me because obviously I have to be a decent pilot of Cloth to make it to a winning end. So I was the best person to ask at that time for him, I guess. So, but yeah, I lose my second winning opportunity. So, which makes my final, I'll go 5-3-1. So, which puts me in top 512. I actually get end off the whole tournament at 369 overall.
Which, at that many match points, is absurdly high, which shows why not all records are treated the same. And to kind of give like probably more like again numbers. I'm doing a quick math here. I should have done this prior, but I'm a statistics kind of guy.
While you do that, to put it in perspective, my round 1 opponent, who also went 5-3-1, he finished at 515th, so he didn't even get top 512, and we had the same record.
Yeah, your average opponent had 5 3/4 wins, so you were playing against players all day that were either getting 5 or 6 wins.
Yeah,
and yes, when you get the 4 wins and 5 wins as early as you did, yes, you will have that toward the tail end of your run. But your first 3 rounds are always the crapshoot, right? You don't really know the quality of player you're going to get drawn with in the first 3 rounds because everyone starts 0-0, so it's purely a randomization thing. And then you're playing against someone who won the same or got the same results you did in previous rounds. So sometimes players just get wins. And then round 3 is when you start really seeing everything kind of stretch out.
Mm-hmm.
And you starting from the get-go, you were just forced to play at high level against high competition for the entire day. Which, again, goes back to the original question. Which regional did you think you did better in? The one that you day 2'd or the one that you missed 2 winning ends? And honestly, I think this tournament probably was a better run for you. Just because you were playing such a high level of opponent all day.
Yeah, I felt more comfortable because my wife was texting me throughout the tournament because she was seeing how I'm doing. And she was like, wow, you're doing really well. I'm like, yeah, what do you mean? It's like, you're at the upper tables. So to put it in perspective, round 1, like we said, totally random. I started at table like 1061. Round 2, I go up to table 132. So in a
which at 1-0, that's still a little bit of randomization because half the tournaments in the bottom half tournaments at the high end. So that still a little randomization, but still kind of that was just the beginning of where you're sitting for the rest of the day.
Yeah, so the next round I go to table 76. The next round I go table 36. Next round I go 223. That's after my loss, so I go down a little bit. But then I go to table 59, table 66, table 64, and then end the day at table 134. So I've been, for a lot of it, I was sub 100. And then obviously at the last, for the win-in, I was not necessarily at the lower end of the tables, but I'm at pretty high compared to like what I'm used to at other tournaments I've been to.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure you as a professor, you know this, but like toward those last rounds or two, everyone knows where that line is, where those matches of, oh, this is serious is happening, and the professors, you notice professors walking around a little bit more. You have spectators watching, you're being closer to where you're at. Like the environment is definitely different when you're in the top 200 tables, regardless of your record. That area and that environment is significantly different to say you're playing at table 500.
Oh yeah, and like towards the last couple rounds, like there was big judge calls near me, like literally like the next table down, like over from me, and there's judges. Normally you have to wait a little bit for a judge. No, they're there because, not saying the lower tables don't matter. Every table matters at these tournaments. Every table means something to players and to judges, but there's more on the line once you get to the upper tables later on in the tournament, and things can get heated, and it did in several tables near me throughout the tournament.
So yeah, so it's like I was telling you, I think you texted me after you're done, and I was like, you had a good tournament. Like, you sent me the screenshots of your RK9 and all this stuff. I'm like, dang, because I think I noticed just how deep your run was before you did. I had to explain to them, like, did you see your opponent's schedule?
Yeah, at that point I was like, kind of finally decompressing, trying to find my friends, and I didn't really like. It didn't become real until like I was eating dinner, and you're like texting me. It's like, bro, like your schedule was very hard, and I looked at it, I'm like, oh yeah, everyone had either a win in, and then 4 of my opponents made day 2. Granted, 2 of them were because of me, but they made day 2.
Yeah, but you don't get to say that often. Like, it's crazy, to be honest with you.
And one thing I want to also highlight is the diversity of the decks I faced.
Oh yeah, like we were talking about how diverse, and it's very counterproductive for what we were talking about at the beginning of today, right? It's like, oh, that so many people play these 2 decks, and then you played legitimately the entire meta.
I did not repeat a single deck. Normally I repeat 1 or 2 decks, which I'm like, okay, that makes sense. If I'm doing well, I'll see the more better decks. But in this case, 9 rounds, 9 decks. I thought that was insane.
And that's crazy, but it's not a bad thing. Like, it goes to what we were talking about, where it is at a certain degree, this meta is so flexible where anyone can play anything.
Yeah.
But if you want to go over that plateau and climb the mountain just a little bit more, that's where the meta really gets consolidated to 3 to 4 archetypes.
Yeah, and I had a good run. I felt comfortable when I played these games. I liked how all of them were different. I wasn't stressing about a certain archetype or anything like that. But yeah, I feel like this was a very great tournament for me. I got 40 championship points for getting top 512, and I got actually prizing. I got 9 booster packs. This is the first tournament I actually got prizing at for doing well. So I opened up those packs and pulled the special illustration rare Ladia CX.
Is that still a $150 card right now?
No, it's 220.
Oh, it went higher than the last time I checked. Okay.
Yeah. Like, I'm sitting with my crew, and they see me pull this. They're like, you better sell that. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm selling it when I'm in Toronto. Because because I didn't want. I already have Latias. I only play low rare. I don't need a super rare card. I don't collect.
So did you end up going to a vendor and just selling it?
I was able to sell the card. I'm not going to say to what or who. I don't want to get in trouble, but I was able to sell the card for 100 cash and $100 in trades.
That's not bad at all.
No.
And the fact that they got some cash out of it, and I'm assuming the trade you just probably got some products, maybe some accessories.
I got some cards. I got 2 gold Trapagos. I got a full art Crispin. I'm fooling around with the Lapras Dialga deck that we talked about probably a couple months ago. It's fun. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna bling this out as best I can.
I mean, when you get the opportunity, yeah, blinging out a deck for free is always the best feeling.
And it's like I know it's not a good deck, but it's a fun deck that I want to try to actually bring to a tournament eventually. Maybe this week. I don't know. Depends if I can get my deck together. It's already late enough as we're recording. But yeah, it's basically he was like, pick up to $100 in my trade binder, and the person had a very nice trade binder. And like I said, I don't collect, so I just took cards I know are going to be playable. And for me, and people may think I'm weird for wanting to get the Lapras EX special art, but it made me happy, so I took it.
Yeah. So with that, that wraps up your Toronto. You had a good run. It was a good tournament. It was everything that we were talking about going in. It was a big tournament. It held up to the hype. The only thing, if you're kind of rating the tournament as how was this? The only thing I think the tournament itself was lacking was a true drama storyline. It was just too much cookie cutter and too much chalk. But that just says that the meta is settling. There's still it basically talks about the lack of volatility in the meta. But yeah,
it was fun, and it was freezing.
Yeah, it was cold. As we're sitting, for those, it is 75 degrees outside where I live, and I'm sure that it's probably not much cooler where you're living as we're recording this in the 3rd week of December. So
yeah,
definitely a temperature difference from what we're used to in a day-to-day.
Oh yeah, I remember getting in the car from the hotel, and me and my friend Justin, we get in. He was like, "Is it normal to see your breath in the car?" It was that cold out. It was 18 degrees Saturday morning. So, but fun, a lot of memories. But yeah, I love going to Toronto. It's a great city. Not sure if I'm going to go to another regional this season yet. Atlanta is an option. I just don't know if I'll have the resources to do it. But I basically was training all season for Toronto, and I think it paid off well for me.
Yeah. And you mentioned that we were texting late on Saturday, day one. So the reason why, so we're going to make a pivot here to the Rogue Deck of the Week. So the reason why I couldn't actually answer him when he was texting, and he's like, I was just waiting for Devin to text me back. I was actually recording the Rogue Deck of the Week YouTube video, and kind of just playing with this deck as he's calling me and trying to text me. So this week's Rogue Deck of the Week is an interesting deck that I found. I didn't even tell Dean what it was until after Toronto because I didn't want to bother him with that. So I was going on results from some online tournaments, and I saw this deck, and I was like, what is this? And I started reading into what the deck does. I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. So this week's Rogue Deck is Scovillain EX Dodrio.
And it's the Fire Scovillain, not the grassed one. Because there's 2 actually out in Standard right now.
Yeah, so it is the Scovillain EX with the ability Dual Type, which actually makes it both a fire and a grass attacker when it's in play.
Yeah, and it has the attack Spicy Rage. Does 70 more damage for each damage countered on this Pokemon. And if you're like, this sounds familiar, this is Radiant Heatran. Radiant Heatran has the same exact attack. The only difference is that the energy cost is only 2 fire versus, like, I think Radiant Heatran has 3 energy costs. And the HP, 260. It's an EX Stage 1 Pokemon, so it's bulky, but not, like, overly bulky. So it's enough to do its job really well.
Yeah, and you don't even need a lot of damage counters on it because the Spicy Rage attack is a 70 multiplier. So with the deck, you're running Magma Basin. So Magma Basin and a Fire Energy from your discard puts 2 damage counters on your Scovillain. Well, that Spicy Rage now is hitting for 150 with 1 energy attached cost on it. Yeah. Now you need 2, but we're talking how quickly this damage can really escalate, and you don't need a lot of damage on it to hit Pokemon really, like, without weakness. Like, you just need 4 damage counters and you're one-shotting most of the meta.
And then 5 and 6, and then you're one-shotting everything in the meta?
Yeah.
And if you think about what the meta is, with having the 260 HP is a big deal, because if you're thinking about, like, your Regidragos, or you're thinking about your Charizards, a lot of these decks are not hitting 260. They're two-shotting you.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I think you actually had a story about this too, right? When you were playtesting this?
Yeah, so I was playtesting, I ran into a Hydreigon deck. And I'm just going to go very quickly, and then if you want to see the matchup and how the actual event of how this went gone, the video is going to drop noon on Friday after recording. So, or after the podcast comes out on the Thursday. And I don't think my opponent knew what my ability was. So he was just treating me as a fire type attacker the entire time. And he hit into me, didn't KO me, and I set my board up. I was already set up as the attacker, but I wanted to make sure I had a secondary attacker. So I was going through all the motions, and my opponent still hasn't realized what's happening. Like, so then I click on the mouse to shows how much damage, because the damage calcs for you before you click on the button, which I think that's a really good thing that Live does. And I just started laughing. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. And I click on it, and then weakness got applied because it's a fire and a grass type. And I've never seen that many damage counters on a Pokemon ever. Like, if this was in real life, it would have been the same situation as someone grabbing their dice bag and just dumping the entire dice bag on top of the Pokemon.
I did that once with Glenn, who was on the podcast when we first started. I played Sable IV during a raid battle with him, and I did like 17,000 damage. So it's similar story with that, but yeah, it's like the fact that you don't need much to hit hard, and then you're not getting one-shot by a lot of the Pokemon. This is a fun deck. Obviously, there's weaknesses like any other rogue deck. I played it. I couldn't get set up, but I was using the Dodrio as an attacker, and it was doing its job for the most part until the very end, where I just ran out of steam. So, like, you have the Scovillain, you have the Dodrio, you play the Fan Call to help, or you play the Fan Rotom to set up your Doduos and Dodrios. You play the Radiant Zard as a tertiary attacker. It's very straightforward. There's not really much pomp and circumstance with this deck, but it's fun. You can hit hard and make your opponent freak out.
Oh yeah, it was like, I don't think my opponent knew what to do. And then I didn't record the match after this, so I played him again like the next match, because I guess we both went to the lobby and then queued up. And I go, oh, he knows exactly what I'm doing. So I mean, it was a good deck. The deck list will be in the show notes. And it's something like I said, all I'm doing is going on Limitless, looking at decks in online tournaments, and that's really where we find a lot of the fun little archetypes that can do interesting. So if you're just trying to find a deck and you're just not sure what to play sometimes, go into that search area, that library. It's just, you never know what other people are putting together if you're just into a writer's block of deck building, or you just want to try something different.
Or like right now we're in a kind of like a lull period with the regionals, with holidays are coming up, or not having a major tournament for next month. This is a great opportunity to kind of expand your horizons, play something that's not meta, and just see what sticks. Like, you may find a archetype or a style that you really identify with that you didn't know before. Like, it's like, oh, I don't want to play this, it's not meta. But you can find a deck that's like that it may be closer to meta, and now you have that information. And that's one thing that that's how I developed as a player. I just found out what deck types I like and trying to find that in the rogue setting, and help me with preparing for Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that being said, is there anything else you want to highlight from the weekend?
No, the weekend was fun. Had a great time with the people I roomed with, and also the Tampa crew that came up to Toronto as well. I feel like I've definitely have grown as a trainer, and I can't wait to see how I'm going to grow some more. I'm already surpassed my CP goal for this season, so I'm just trying to do the best I can while I can. But yeah, with all that being said, I think that's it for this week. We will record for next week, so we'll have a Christmas episode out for y'all to listen to while you travel to and from wherever you're staying for Christmas. Devin, is there anything you want to end off with?
No, the only thing I would really say is, for those who want to see these Rogue Deck showcases, definitely follow us on our YouTube channel, Rogue Deck Chronicles. We are going to be posting more regularly on that to showcase all the kind of decks we do talk about. If you have a archetype or a deck you want us to showcase and look into, please message us on, either put a comment on the YouTube channel, message us in any of the platforms that the podcast is on. We do check that. We do try to experiment with as many decks as possible. We just want to see what you guys are excited about, and we do thank you guys for sticking with us and enjoying the podcast throughout the year.
Yeah, it's been a wild couple months with this, and we're excited to see what 2025 brings. But with all that being said, we're going to get going, and we'll see y'all next week, and have fun playing those sneaky decks, y'all.
See ya!